Let's get started. So right here, what you see is my Python notebook that describes the analysis in R, and it is implemented in Data Scientist Workbench. So this particular file contains both the principal component analysis and explorator factor analysis together, and I divide it into multiple steps. So the steps are going to be to import the data, load necessary packages, extract necessary data for PCA, set up all of the preconditions for PCA, so make your decisions, run some PCA and visualizations, and interpret the output. Later on, I will record a separate lecture that covers steps from 7 to 11. Those are going to be focused on EFA, and that's going to be set up for the EFA, running and visualizing EFA, interpreting the outputs, some parallel analysis that I have mentioned in my previous lecture, and some mini cross-validation. Note is I do encourage you to type your codes as we go along through this notebook, and this practice will ensure better retention of the information, and I think it would be very useful. All right, so let's begin. Step 1 is importing the data, and the data are in the CSV file format, and it's named new underscore prof underscore data.csv. And here are the variables that are actually in the data set. So there's an ID variable describing each observation, each unit of analysis, and there's a professor name, which I have blinded in this particular case. There's the presentation, present, explain, communicate, teach, workload, and difficulty. Those variables we're going to subject to the principal components analysis. Also, there's an overall learning experience. The value of the overall learning experience is evaluated on a scale from 1 to 7, where 1 is very low and 7 is very high. Number 10 is retake rate. So considering whatever you learned about the course, what all of your experiences, would you take this course again is essentially the question, and that is going to be the proportion of people out of 100 who would still take the course considering their experience. And finally, there's these two variables, inf periods and kind. So those two are the two factors that I have been working with when I was developing the charisma scale for my own work. So to read the data into R or using R statistical language is quite easy. So here you have the object data and the operator that assigns the read.csv, the file, into the R. So the file is read into R environment and then assigned into the object data. So naturally, the first thing that you want to do is take a look at the names in the data. So this can be achieved easily with the function names. Then you want to also take a look at the structure of the data, and here you can see a little bit of information about the structure of the data. And what you immediately see is that present, explain, communicate, teach, workload, difficulty are all having decimal points, some numbers after the decimal point, which suggests that those probably are not the raw numbers that each student have provided, but rather the averages for each professor for each one of those courses. So next you might want to take a look at the summary of the data, which is going to give them information about the mean, the max, and the minimum, the maximum, the median, and the mean of the data set. For ID number, it's not very descriptive, but for other variables, it is quite descriptive. As you can see, the means are fairly high, and the max and the min also tend to be quite high. So, which suggests that the students tend to evaluate the professors to be quite good at teaching. And finally, you can take a look at the head of the data. So that is the first 6 rows of the data, and just take a look at how that looks like. So next, you might want to load the necessary packages. In this particular tutorial, I'm going to be focusing on the package psych, and also will be taking a look at ggplot2, which allows us to create some visualization. The package psych itself contains the code for both PCA and EFA, the functions for those two analyses, and also for the parallel analysis. So it's fairly simple that you need to download only two packages and use them on your computer to perform both of the dimension reduction techniques that I'm talking about. If you do not have those packages, you want to install those packages, and this can be achieved quite easily with the command install.packages and package names in quotation marks inside. So loading the packages is quite easy. So you basically type library, the name of the package, and voila, you can begin your analyses. So let us extract the necessary data for PCA. As you can see, the data set itself is quite is a little bit larger than the variables that I have mentioned previously. So let's take a look at the names in the data. So you have the ID, professor name. So those two variables are quite unnecessary for our PCA analysis. And we'll start with present, which indexes at 3. And we'll continue until difficulty, which indexes at 8. So to extract those data, we'll simply use this particular command. And here I'm creating a new object called comp.data and assigning it the part of the data matrix that we have, but only including the columns from 3 to 8. Then I want to make sure that I have extracted the correct columns, and I run the names function on this new object comp.data. And what we see in here, the output 40, is that we indeed have extracted all of the relevant relevant variables for our analysis.